Words That Never Leave You, 50 Pearls of Wisdom and Reflections from Survivors Across the World, a new book by Holly McKay. Holly, tell us about this book.
So I guess for my really 10 to 15 years that I have been traveling the world and working in different war zones and different humanitarian crises, I've met many, many different people. And sometimes I'm really just blown away by things that people say to me. I've always kept sort of a little bit of a side journal when I'm doing an interview or really just in a conversation with somebody. And they say something to me that, again, like the book says, words that never leave you, that have prompted me to really think differently about something, or that have stayed with me, or that have really changed the way that I see the world, or made me reflect in a very different way. And so it was only really recently that I had this idea that I wanted to share some of these. Because this has sort of been a little bit of my personal manifesto for a while. And so I thought I would kind of go through and cull sort of the 50 most meaningful, which is really hard because there are many things that have said to me, but these were probably the most powerful 50 statements that were said to me from people from very different walks of life, many of them survivors of really the most abominable things that humans do to each other. And it really, what I wanted to share was this sort of innate human resiliency in people, and that it's not always about having the most education or coming from sort of a deeply academic or philosophical background. Sometimes it's really, as I said, the most beautifully ordinary people, the most sort of everyday people that are struggling to get by, that really have the most profound things to say. And that's really what I wanted to sort of share in this short read.
Yeah, well, I mean, so your career has really been one where you have gone out into the world and created these vignettes of stories of people in the middle of turmoil, conflicts, or even just changes of life that you have observed. When when you sort through these, I mean, does it? And you were thinking about this book. Where is it in there the notion that recording the thoughts, the poignant thoughts of humanity, which is what I really think this book um, is something that goes beyond the crafted art of statesmanship and prepared statements, and because these are, you collected a lot of this stuff, as they say, in the field, outside the wire, and on your own, without the protections of the world. You just go out there and you meet these people and you find these stories. How important do you think it is that these stories are heard above or equal to all of the prepared stuff that's out there?
For me, this is the reason I do this work, is because I think when people are in a war, or they've suffered an immense trauma, um, the big thing with, with victims and survivors is, and I use both terms because not all victims survive, but they're often unheard, and they feel that they've been silenced or marginalized, or if they're from a minority group, they've spent their life incredibly oppressed. And they very much feel that, that their voice will never be heard, and no longer matters. And the reason that I, have always wanted to do this work is because I firmly believe that that there, journalism, or writing as it is not to be the voice, but to really be the vessel for that voice, and to project what people are going through. And so I hope with these very sort of small vignettes, and it's a, it's a short read compared to a lot I've written in the past, but I hope that they can sort of reach people maybe the way that they've reached me, because they've been things that, again, I've never forgotten. And I also want to preface in saying that, not every person of the 50 is someone that, we would consider to be a quote unquote good human being. Majority are, but there are a few in there that, perhaps are a sort of enemy, or from the other side. But I've included them because I think it's important, because they've made me think of things very differently. And they've forced me to reflect on something outside my own sort of narrative that I had on a situation. And so I wanted to include them because I really do believe that we can look at the enemy funny, but we have to understand them a little bit too. And that really, at the end of the day, everybody thinks what they're doing is the right thing to kind of do. I don't think too many people, there are exceptions, but most people, even though they may commit the most evil things, somehow believe that they're doing it for the right reasons. And so I think it's important to understand those. So I'd really love people's feedback on some of the vignettes and the things that spoke to them, or what they agree or disagree with. And I'm really looking forward to being able to share that with people. And I also think one thing for me as a journalist is that I've always been really fascinated by how humans can really get through the worst scenarios imaginable. Um, I've really spoken to people who've endured things that thankfully, you and I and most of us will never have to get anywhere near in our lives, but they get through to the other side. And how is that possible? And what are human boundaries? And I also think in the West there is this really sort of big fixation on a lot of mammoth and sometimes masochistic things that people do for survival by their own choice, and those feats are all wonderful and admirable. Don't get me wrong, but for me, I've always been a lot more interested in the people who survive and get through, the ones that don't have all this elite training, people that have no choice but because they're in that situation that they are able to sort of get through and accomplish incredible things that anywhere in the world, if their story was known, would be considered to be an extraordinary act of bravery. But we often don't hear about it because their stories are so far away or so overshadowed. So I hope that this little read might give people a little bit of a richer understanding of how resilient we all are and what we're all as human beings capable of deep down.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I read it, it was, very clearly in some cases, you're talking about ordinary people finding a way through an apocalypse, in very little literal terms for them. It's a fascinating read, and the fact that you have learned so much. I mean, very clearly, you have like mountains of notebooks, and then and these 50 stories have a particular meaning to you, and they strike me as a very important collection of mindful thoughts that everybody, I think, should apply. And so I enjoyed the read, as you can tell. And so um, for everybody that is watching, the book is actually available on Amazon. It is available in both Kindle form and in paperback form. If you're watching on YouTube, we're going to put a link to the links where you can get the book off of Amazon, and the article on Substack will also have links to where you can get the book. It's a quick read, but it's one that you I think you're going to wind up reading it over and over again and just pondering each of the passages, because there's a mountain of knowledge underneath the tip of a couple of sentences that very clearly have struck the author of this piece very deeply over time. So thanks, Holly. And, I hope people enjoy the book.
Thank you, and thanks for your support. And yeah, it's not always easy. Independent journalism is not always easy. It's hard to get by. So I really value the support of listeners and readers for the book, and also for the Substack too. So thank you.
All right. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.